just in time for Halloween. We've got a horrifying set of talking points to cover today. And we'll get into it. Thanks everybody for joining us. We're typically starting at about 5 after the hour, so we're just going to let some folks trickle in as they do, and we'll get started here in a moment. While we're getting there, just a note of housekeeping, which is this is our last day of programming for October, but we will have a full set of programs in November. We've got Power Hour on the 14th with Eduardo Batia. We've got a Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes the following Thursday, and then as usual, our general forum will be the last Tuesday of the month. I believe that's 26th, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. We will also have some programs in December. We'll have our Power Hour. I believe it's December 16th. And then the next set of programs will be pre-recorded so that we're not interrupting anybody's Christmas or New Year's celebrations. But all of that will come. You'll see emails from me with regards to our November programming here soon, but we definitely want to make sure that you guys are aware that on the 14th, we'll be talking to Eduardo Batia, former president of the Senate here in Puerto Rico, executive director of the Puerto Rico Federal Affairs Administration, and of course, the author of the Puerto Rico Energy Transformation Act. That'll be a timely conversation because it'll also be the first one in the aftermath of the political changes both here on the island, here on the island and on the mainland. And so we'll be talking about not only 10 years since Act 57 and its implications, but what may be coming next. That is perfectly in line with what we're planning on talking to our esteemed guest today about. For those of you who don't know, CP is the executive director of La Cooperativa Hidroeléctrica de la Montaña, an old friend of the program, longtime listener, you might say, and a graduate once upon a time of the Puerto Rico Energy Capital Access Program that Tom leads through the Fundación Borencana. So I think on that note, we'll jump right in. Tom, any other housekeeping notes that I may have missed? Otherwise,
I think we started the first organizational meetings for the first two working groups. We had them before. If you were stayed with us and came and joined us again here, thank you. We're looking to hold probably monthly meetings and at least on the microgrids, looking out to February and potentially doing an in-person workshop to kind of bring things together. But we're beginning to get the groups on the way. We talked about a group looking at innovation and entrepreneurship and investment in Puerto Rico. There's interest in looking at renewables and energy finance in Puerto Rico. There could be any number of things. It's really we're here to help facilitate the progress and the communication, the understanding, and hopefully action at the end of the day on important things to drive the energy future in Puerto Rico. And
yeah,
did you say esteemed or did you say steamed when you were talking about CP? I mean,
both
I'm
apply.
kind of used to him. I'm mad as hell and I'm not taking it anymore. But either one works, I think. I would also point out that CP went on also to become a mentor and an instructor for the Puerto Rico Energy Capital Access Program too. And
so
people at the island have so much practical experience. When he started, he had a full head of hair.
yeah. CP and I had matching afros back in the day. And one other note on the working groups before we really jump into our conversation today. We had one about the end of life cycle management of solar. We had one about microgrid development. Those are the first two we're starting with, but we're planning on having many more. I want to also take this moment to invite everybody to engage with us on social media. Become members if you're not already. Um, if you want access to the Power Hour and Puerto Rico Energy in 60-minute segments, like the one that we have upcoming with Eduardo Batia, become a member. We have individual, corporate, and small business levels. And really, these conversations are brought to you because of the support that our members are able to provide. So
Yeah.
we
And
make
government,
that clear.
nonprofit, and academic, there's no membership fees. They're waived. So, come, join, participate, act.
The, the other thing is, and we've said this before, but this is the Puerto Rico Energy Forum. Forums are about an exchange and interchange of ideas, and so we want to hear from you. We want to hear about what you want to hear about, and this is the part of the reason why we're doing the working groups is that we're not the experts in everything, but we want this to be a meeting place for lots of different perspectives to come together and provide those perspectives. One other note is. And I mentioned this in the email I sent out last night, but we are recording all of this. You don't need to invite your note taker. If you do, because it's stuck somewhere in there, and I know that's the case for some people, we'll reject it. And so if you don't see your AI friends here, that's why. I think on that note, we'll jump right in. Everybody knows me at this point, but I'm Sam Tallman, executive director, or not executive director, director for energy services. I almost gave myself a promotion. Director for energy services at Green Power Technologies, Puerto Rico, and we do small hydro projects. I'm joined by Tom King, my conversation partner and founding director of Fundación Borincana. And today we're talking with CP Smith about the upcoming political changes and their implications. So CP, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's we should just kick off with some of the obvious that we have three gringos talking about Puerto Rican politics and the energy changes that we'll be seeing. So we'll add that asterisk on there. I mean, we have Javier Vélez, who's actually really, really knowledgeable about politics there. And I do want to give a shout out to Ron. Both Ron and I coordinated shirts this morning, making sure that we were representing together our gang, and I'll just say that any of my opinions do not reflect the policy of the cooperativa necessarily, and I only inform myself from the dumpster fire of X, Reddit, and other low-quality social media channels, and only when I've exhausted those do I actually go to reputable news sources. So just want to make sure that I will put those caveats in there before we go any further.
Yeah, let me say one other piece of housekeeping notes, which is if you have questions, if you have comments, put them into the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of our conversation. We want to make sure that this conversation can flow pretty smoothly. CP, so we're a week out from elections. There's probably the most talked about, the hottest political point in Puerto Rico, not just for this election cycle, but generally in the middle of the 4-year cycle, is around energy. Every candidate for governor, and we'll start at the state level, every gubernatorial candidate has an opinion on Luma. It seems like the broad position is Luma para afuera. Yet there's no suggestion whatsoever for what exactly that means, what the pathway to doing that is, or what would come next. And that seems like a glaring hole. When you hear that, when you see that, how do you navigate the implications of the political cycle, given that that's sort of the main talking point?
Well, my impression is, and this is kind of a sad comment, is that that aside from Luma pa fuera, there isn't really any coherent discussions or policy put forward about what alternatives could be. There's some kind of like walking backwards to a Prepa 2.0. UTIER just recently put out their 4-pillar platform on how they believe that they could reposition themselves as the energy service provider in Puerto Rico. There was also a report that was just issued, I think, about 5 days ago from the Colegio de Abogados, on an analysis of the contracts of Luma Energy and Genera PR. And in a basic summary of that is that they believe that those contracts could be nullified. But they do highlight, and I think this is the big operative issue, is that there's really been no findings or no complaints issued by the P3A. So
Yep.
I think we're seeing a little disconnect in between the political posturing and the connection, the populist message that works, that channels in to some of the anger, that the rightful anger that there is in Puerto Rico. But then when you actually talk about the competent administration of the contract, walking that contract down a path where you could actually terminate those, they're by their own statements of the P3A, they haven't actually issued any findings of deficiencies. So as long as none of that happens, what we're really doing is setting up potentially, even if they get, if the contracts are eliminated, a great exit windfall for both Luma Energy and Genera potentially, because those kind of settlements would be negotiated, not to mention all the complications it would have. I think it's important to highlight that no matter what, there is going to be a change of administration. Governor Pierluisi, I don't think was as engaged on energy as he had an opportunity to. And then that's created an opportunity here for these kind of critiques. And I'll just say that despite some great efforts by other industry leaders in trying to declare a real emergency in Puerto Rico for this energy situation, that the government hasn't taken them up on that. It hasn't really acted as if Puerto Rico is in an emergency. And I think that also creates the space for these critiques that will, I think, create a lot of noise and not a lot of clarity moving forward after finally the elections are decided. I don't think any of this would be appropriate to end on that comment without mentioning the incredible, stupidly racist comments over the past weekend in New York at Madison Square Garden that has inflamed the diaspora and of course really kind of set a very solid perspective. If there was any doubt afterwards, it's really set a perspective that Puerto Rico is not being well served and is actually just an afterthought. And then that trickles down to the energy issue as well. So I think that unfortunately all of this is coming together at a time where what is getting lost is probably the biggest change agent that Puerto Rico has, which would be to reestablish a resilient and cost-effective grid for the Puerto Rico energy service for the people of Puerto Rico.
So you mentioned a couple of different things, and I mean, I think it's true. Everybody's kind of leaned into the energy, get them out, it's brought harumph, right? I mean, I keep flashing back to Blazing Saddles. But the part of the message I think is, we want to talk about it, but we don't want to talk about it. And one of the things that I've seen come up, and a number of people have commented, we've commented to each other, and is that there's an emergency in Puerto Rico, right? I mean, what's happening in Puerto Rico is holding on a bit better than Cuba, but you have power stations out, you're under demand, and people are trying to work to get replacements in, and Genera is working, and Luma and the regulator, et cetera. But the politicians are kind of shuffling papers, right? They don't want to be in the middle of this. And I wonder,
they're shuffling papers as much as organizing caravanas. So I think the priority right now is seeing how many people they can get on caravanas to start, driving around Puerto Rico. So I don't see that even is happening.
It's a political opportunity rather than let's do something about this. And
part of the challenge, and I hate to continue to hark on expectation management, but when the messages are the ones that we've been seeing across the political spectrum on the island, it's not clear to me what you would be able to expect out of any of those administrations, given what we know will likely be backtracked regardless of who wins. And so you have an underinformed, electorate anyway, voting for something that is entirely unnuanced, and to Tom's point, isn't taken particularly seriously when in terms of the crisis mode of what we're expecting, given the level of emergency that the end users, the industrial sector, the broader individual residential sector are treating this this set of challenges. I see it as the fundamental challenge that the fundamental issue that we don't have a more literate on the energy sector, and to see a more literate leadership voice when it comes to what needs to happen with the energy sector. And CP, to your point, the current administration, though having, I think, good people in a variety of positions, has broadly not set expectations as to what is possible and what the pathway forward is. And I'm personally very hungry for that kind of thing, to be able to say, look, I want my vote to go in an educated manner towards a platform that I can understand. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where the energy sector goes based on what's being propositioned right now.
I think one of the things that kind of struck me over this past, we tried putting through a project, and I have to say that we got a project that was supposed to increase and make it easier for the creation of electric cooperatives in Puerto Rico. Something that the president of the Energy Bureau has written in an op-ed that was very widely disseminated, which is the future of Puerto Rico is electric cooperatives and microgrids, community microgrids and electric cooperatives. And we actually put through the legislature project that got passed by the House of Representatives and the Senate in Puerto Rico, and it died on the desk of Pierluisi, which I just think is a real shame. That it really, like, here is supposedly the chief executive that is supposed to be doing everything possible to address this this increase, and it sat on the desk for, what is it, 20 days? I forget how long he has to sign it. And it was it's like it's a very basic amendment that is actually just helps create, or streamlines the process for creation of community electric cooperatives. Now, what I do have to say is that, and here is kind of like always the challenge of bandwidth. I was always surprised when we would meet with representatives, senators, and representatives that are on committees that oversee these issues, that are supposedly in the know, and how there was still a real lack of some general conceptual vernacular and understanding of these issues. Now, they had a deeper understanding of some of the other issues within the energy industry, but I think that, and then it just drops down logarithmically from there. Like, these were the ones that knew, and we were like presenting what I would consider kind of basic concepts. And it seemed like there was an interchange of information there. But then when we've reached out to other representatives that are not even on those committees, then it's like almost no knowledge about what the grid entails, what it's going to take to keep supply and demand matched, what are the mechanisms, and therefore you get a couple vocales, you get a couple, groups that have an outsized weight in their ability to access the media and messaging, and then they kind of basically dominate the discussion, probably not any different than the United States in some respects. But considering that this is an emergency and that this is actually one of the biggest issues, I don't see any other platform issues that are really talking about many other things, and energy being among the most important for the future of Puerto Rico. I'm actually kind of surprised that there's not more efforts by the legislature and the legislators themselves to understand better these issues, to really dig deep and then kind of like prepare, some documentation that provides an overview. Something like that would be, I think, a value add for the legislative process, because there's still, I think, work that is left undone there. So there is the executive side, which is the administration, which would go, from basically Fortaleza to the offices of the P3A that are supposed to have oversight over the major contract players. Then you also have Fortaleza that can nominate the independent to the Independent Energy Bureau. But I still think there's a lot of space there for the legislature to help hone in. They did a great job, I think, under the leadership of Batia and Selheimer, to open up the most creative space possible. But I think that now that we've seen the reality out there for a few years, I think there is the ability to hone in some of that legislature that can then actually provide better focus for Fortaleza, for the governor's office, assuming they're taking leads from the people and the people's representatives. Now, if we're just falling back on the cacique model, where the legislature does their thing, but then the governor comes in obviously with her or his agenda, and then sets that, there's obviously that administration room. But I do think that the lack of information about this is actually going to not set us up for a smooth continuation or development of projects that may exist. We could actually see some hiccups, which can translate to higher uncertainty. Higher uncertainty turns into risk, and higher risk and uncertainty turns into higher costs. And I think we just saw that with the cancellation of the Energy Bureau's Tranche 3, where basically they were saying that they were not happy with the indicative pricing that was coming out of those, and that got canceled. So now we've opened up Tranche 4. And I think that these are the kind of things that really, I think we're going to give Ron here a heart attack here, or a stroke pretty soon. But these are the kind of things that I believe are important to help educate the legislators, especially the ones after next week that get elected, and help them understand, as we finish up this quadrennial. Well, I mean, I guess it's technically done, but whatever period is left, and then move into the next one, have a better plan.
I think there's one point here that's
now?
worth mentioning, which
Okay,
is
one at a
that
time. Sam,
Fortaleza,
Tom, which one?
Fortaleza also has an opportunity. The next governor has an opportunity to appoint the chairman of PREPA's governing board, and I think that this builds on the conversation that we had last Thursday, which is there is proper management from PREPA's side to be able to guide and say, look, this is what we need out of the legislature. This is what, and that also, I think this is the other important link, is that the Energy Bureau responds to the policy that's in place. And so if the legislature can enact the governor's agenda that makes sense from a PREPA perspective, it ends up connecting a lot of these different pieces, but it requires a legislature that responds to not only the head of PREPA and the head of PREPA to respond to the head of Fortaleza, right, the executive on the island, but then to communicate those across the vast set of seats that are going to change place. We have a musical chairs in Congress in the Senate.
So Sam, to your point, one of the biggest areas that the legislature can hone in on is actually retaking the law from the 1949 or whatever that created La Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica, and really help it make the complete transition to asset management. And I think, so the report that came out from the Colegio de Abogados, that actually one of the findings in there was that they need to transfer the oversight of the contracts for the private operators to La Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica, to PREPA. But I think the issue is, when you look at the staff that's presently there,
right,
it is a staff composed of operators. These are people where, when they look, I guess, the old axiom, like, if if the only tool you have is a hammer, all your problems look like nails. And that's kind of what the issue is, that you have actually a team that is actually leading Prepa, that it comes from a background and a career as operators. They are not asset managers. They do not come in with the skill set, the experience, or even the outlook that an asset manager has on managing these contracts and resources. And so I think that it's good for the colegio to recommend a shift to an agency that could or should have more institutional knowledge that would allow one to better manage these contracts than the P3A, because I definitely think the P3A one has, if I understand correctly, has only 4 full-time employees and a small team of subcontracted attorneys and engineers. That is just, that's insufficient for one contract of 1 billion, much less multi-billion, multi-year contracts. It is definitely undermanned. And on top of that, I don't believe that within the team of that they actually have the deep expertise in asset management that's needed on power plants and grids and all the rest. So keeping that in mind, I think the real space for the legislature to, in the first quadrenio, to step into is to actually help Prepa make that transition, such that when the governor starts nominating personnel for the board and all the rest, that nomination is actually for a person that comes from an asset management career, 20, 25 years in asset management. That's going to totally change the way that these contracts are managed, as opposed to the outlook of an operator, which is going to look at through this problem through a different set of lens.
Yeah, but it's not, and again, and we've talked about this last week. It's not just that, right? I mean, if you think about the things that we're taking on through the microgrid group, the things that we're thinking about, where we're taking on through the circular economy group, et cetera. These are things in terms of future planning. What are we doing? How do we set these up? These are things that PREPA should be doing, as basically they are the energy group, and they should be doing planning. They should be doing strategy. They should be doing all these things, managing the contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And, like a utility does, right? A utility in any other part has got to, plan ahead. You're looking at what we're doing. Hey, end of life of these things coming up. How do we deal with integrating, electric vehicles? How are we looking at basically AI and everything else coming up? They're going to get impacted. They need to be the ones who are setting the agenda for that. I mean, if Luma does the work, that's fine, but they're a contractor for them, and ultimately it needs to be PREPA driving these things. Clearly, they're not ready. Clearly, there's a need for the things that we're trying to do here, and bring it to the attention. Yeah.
Let me ask you one more question about this, and then I want to switch levels of governance and talk about a different area of fiefdomism. Given the scenarios that you and Tom just laid out, how do we get away from the ping pong of highly politicized energy agendas, so that we don't go through this exact same thing in 3 or 4 years, because the next gubernatorial candidates say that platform is from my predecessor, and by definition is something that is inferior to what I would propose, and we switch gear all the time. We're talking about one of the things that the political leaders in this next cycle can do, but it requires a political leader to appoint these individuals, which makes it inherently at risk of their successors undoing or redoing or not actually making sustainable progress in one direction. How do we get away from that ping pong?
Yeah, I think that the solution for that would be institutional, in the sense that we would actually have less puestos de confianza. So the puestos de confianza, the positions of special trust and confidence, in the United States, in Gringolandia, that basically comes to about 1 to 2% of the total positions that are out there. And they tend to be the very highest positions that kind of set the policy portion. In Puerto Rico, on average, it is about 25%. That's a very, very deep core. When you have that many positions of special trust and confidence, you do not have an, a cadre of personnel that are there to protect the institution and to maintain that stability. What you lose is you basically lose the top quarter of that entire pyramid of the structure. And when that goes, then you've lost all the lessons learned that you just had over the past 4 years. You've lost probably the relationships. And then you're inviting a whole new set of discussions and re-education. So I think that it doesn't come from changing the governor, whoever that may be. That sets a policy tone. It's the fact that these institutions are not protected at the highest level. And because we have these huge deep cuts and changes, then I think that is what lends itself to a varying wind. Because if we're going to look at anything from the 2016 experience with Trump, is that there was this very deep cadre in a lot of institutions that actually protected the institutions despite ravaging winds that were vacillating back and forth quite a bit. Now institutions can only handle that for so long before they actually start fraying. And there was a lot of, I think everybody probably remembers the huge number of resignations from the Department of State that basically took out, decades, dozens and dozens of decades of experience collectively. But I think that Puerto Rico could go in that direction. I think that's actually what the FOMB has also criticized, is the number of positions of special trust and confidence that tend to undermine continuous progress as the administrations change. I do think that if we're going to speak about like a Luma Energy and a Genera and to prevent that, I think that those organizations will probably have retained some very good lawyers to make sure that that they will be as immovable a force as possible, short of the people of Puerto Rico coughing up hundreds of millions of dollars to conclude those contracts. So I think that if there's going to be any stability, because there is a lack of institutional within the state government, with so many positions of confianza, special trust and confidence, I think the next one will actually be the parties that sign those contracts. And I think those parties will actually provide some stability that perhaps the government doesn't have at this point.
And you mentioned the fiscal oversight and management board.
Yep.
The FOMB is working very hard right now on civil service reform, which is going to tackle this exact issue and has implications far beyond just the energy sector. To institute a habit of fiscal responsibility and management within the various agencies and departments at all levels of government requires a degree of stability despite political changes, right? And it can't be that compliance becomes a negotiation. Its compliance is built into budget compliance is built into just the way that the departments operate. So
I think that one of the things aligned with that, Sam, that there's two other structures well, there's one structure, the Energy Bureau, that I think is also very key for maintaining that stability. So I think that even if political winds might change in a number of different areas, the commissioners, and they have changed, and even though commissioners have changed, there's been a constancy at the Energy Bureau that when anybody asks me what is the best promise of a better Puerto Rico when it comes to the energy grid and all the rest, it is the commissioners and the Energy Bureau. I mean, I don't think there's going to be other institution that is going to do more for the people of Puerto Rico, and do it in a very exactly in the kind of governance way that you would want. Low profile, competent, with expressions that are transparent as far as they go in terms of Puerto Rico. Now, I will highlight another option that presents an opportunity and risk in Puerto Rico, and as I've shared before, that because there are so few legislators that are actually truly informed about the energy industry, the complexities that go into this, the Puerto Rican government and the legislature is actually fairly easy to lobby at. And that means that you can leverage conversations, discussions, and education with a few legislature a few legislators, and that has an outsized impact because a lot of the other legislators will then defer to that person that's recognized as an expert within the legislature. So it makes it economical, and I'm pretty sure that any measure that is calling for stability can focus their efforts there to make sure that those efforts continue. And I have no doubt that any of the serious contenders in the grid, including Luma Energy and Genera, probably know the parties very well and will do their part to also maintain their stability. Now, well, I'm not saying that that's in the best interest of Puerto Rico or whatever. I'll let other people make that decision. But certainly when we're talking about the interest in stability, there will be those mechanisms in place that make Puerto Rico more apt for maybe massaging that process.
So on the note of stability, let's change gears a little bit and talk about a different level, because one of the realities of politics in Puerto Rico is that everybody gets elected every 4 years all at once, and so we have a lot of changeover, particularly at the executive level, at the legislative level, at the state house. But it looks like this election cycle, municipalities are going to stay pretty much the same. Across the 78 municipalities, maybe 5 or 6 are really planning on changing hands in a dramatic way. And I'm a vocal advocate for federalism. I believe that local challenges are often best addressed at local levels. And I know that you're working on the municipal level with community groups and community microgrids and whatnot. How does that stability play into this political changes, or is it just because even where it's staying the same, it's still a political year and they have their eyes focused on a different shiny object at the moment? Progress,
well,
delays of progress. What's happening at the municipal level that you're seeing, and how does it affect energy?
Well, the one thing that I see that is probably the most disturbing trend is the fact that this year, most of the municipalities, including any new public servants that come in, any new alcaldes, are coming into a completely different financial reality. This is going to be the year where most of them are going to be facing those big cuts of, up to half of their budget. And that is going to have a serious negative impact in their ability and their bandwidth to attend to anything else outside of the basics. So I think that what I believe here is that anybody that is running for a municipal mayor position should be looking at this with very big wise open, because they're going to be stepping into a huge administrative managerial problem from the get-go with the lack of funding that a lot of these municipalities have seen. And I mean, in particular, the municipalities where they are facing the demographic destiny of an aging population and the youth that have largely abandoned those municipalities, looking for opportunities and ability to create a life for themselves that many of these municipalities won't offer or can't offer. So I think that when we look at that situation, there is going to be no bandwidth for other projects and efforts that are going to, except for the few well-funded, well-managed with good tax-based municipalities, like Bayamón could do whatever they want, because they have the tax base, they have the mature management at the municipal level. It's impressive. I mean, when you compare a municipality with its governance and the maturity of its staff and its ability to channel a tax base and resources to Bayamón, to something like Utuado, both under PMP alcaldes, night and day. You have a meeting with somebody in Bayamón, they come there with a tablet, it's all linked, they understand how it is. When we meet with Utuado, it is notebook, paper, and pen. And after that meeting, you don't know whatever happens after that. So I think that there's these kind of real resource differences that are going to, and in great part backed by the demographic destiny that each of these different municipalities are seeing, that is going to largely dictate the ability to have any meaningful conversation about energy transformation. I almost feel that it's whatever you can bring into those communities is of value, because the municipalities are going to be largely locked out. The majority of them will be locked out of the energy transformation.
Do
So,
you think this is what finally drives the consolidation of municipalities that people have been talking about for so long?
Unfortunately, no. I think that there is, you know, it's the politics, the local politics there. It would take, unfortunately, I think that would take an action that would be imposed upon the people. It wouldn't be a voluntary action. There is a very close feeling and alignment of a local resident's interests with who is in the alcalde, in the, who's in that office. And I think that if they felt like now we were going to roll those in for a measure of efficiency and cost savings, and then we join 5 municipalities together. I mean, you have like you have municipios like Maricao that has less than 5,000 people,
Right.
well,
and and
Yeah.
these are some very, very small municipalities where the tax base isn't there to afford all these other positions. So you could rationally say that makes sense. But if you ask anybody from there, would they rather get themselves rolled up into any of the adjacent municipalities? The answer is no.
well, and my thoughts are that, and I take notes by hand, so I'm not gonna take too much umbrage
You're an old
at your
soul at
comment.
heart. It's
I'm an
it's
old soul at
appropriate that
heart.
you live the way that you're how you are.
The landscape, as far as I see it on the municipal level, is that there's an innovate or die risk or decision in front of them. It's one of the things that you bring up. Bayamon. Bayamon's decided to innovate in many ways, and a highly electable municipal administration.
I do want to
I'm not
highlight
sure
one
that
thing.
I'm
I
not
want to
sure that it
highlight
would.
one thing about there. We also have Bayamon, and for example, in our service area, probably the most the best, most resourced municipality out there is Hajuja. They both have something in common. Alcaldes that have been there for well, since probably the last century. And I think, that there is, it takes a while to learn federal government programs. It takes a while to organize resources, and when you change out the entire shop every 4 years, then that also means that there's a new federal government's contract officer. They may have proficiency in English. Most of them don't. There's a lot to learn when it comes to all of these programs. And that's going to be the next best channel of funding, will be from federal sources, because it's not going to come from the state and the municipalities unless they readjust and redo their tax basis, which is going to cause a lot of suffering. But these kind of things, that unless they create a new source of revenue to work from to develop programs, I think that then it's the federal programs. But I think it's very important to recognize that the most successful municipalities, best managed at this point, are also the ones that they've left a civil servant, not a civil, but elected official in there for a long time, and that accumulation of knowledge and experience eventually benefits the town. I hope that this is not a mistaking causation for correlation kind of issue, or correlation for causation, but that has been up till now the experience of how I see the maturity level and the benefits that the municipalities are able to provide their citizens, very closely tied to how long that mayor has been in office.
So I want to hit on something that you said, which is that municipalities have a rapidly drying up source of funding for their operations. Municipalities in Puerto Rico cannot levy their own taxes. There is a CRIM, but it's levied at the state level, and they don't really have much control over it. And even how it's distributed, the revenues from that tax are convoluted and often. Let's just leave it at convoluted. As far as I see it, and in fact, 2 months ago, the mayor of Coamo, made waves by basically saying, look, 30 to 35 municipalities may go out of business, so to speak, because of financial issues. That to me opens a very attractive door, not to consolidate municipalities, but to consolidate administrative regions when it comes to a couple of different areas: education, infrastructure, police, uh, hospitals and healthcare infrastructure. Energy seems like a natural fit
Garbage
in
collection.
some of this.
I mean, like,
Garbage collection, absolutely.
Yeah.
honestly, in terms of priorities, the energy problem is an enabler for the new economy and for the future, but they are fighting literally the fires of today, which is like, how are we going to pay to collect garbage? And where do we take the garbage? I mean, how far away do we have to do that, and what is that going to cost me? That's way higher at that is point than anything else, because education is handled at the state level. They don't have any control over that. So like the one things,
Yet.
the services that they actually can provide are limited to the direct assistance that, basically populations need to keep themselves from being overrun. So, with health problems. So some of these municipalities have, municipal health clinics, but, those are the biggest priorities. So like when you start talking about energy, there's a recognition that, yes, this is an issue and my people need it. But they're also looking at it, generally speaking, from the residential perspective and not necessarily from the nexus of economic activity. And I've noticed that in a couple conversations I've had. They're very interested in and rightfully so, of making sure that Doña Pepa and Don Juan Pueblo have, electricity in their homes, but then they're not great champions for the businesses that actually generate the employment for their communities. And they will do, like, there are a couple municipalities and mayors that have become very famous for trying to making sure that they energize the local businesses that are in their area. And they can be very effective in that role. But I'll just say that there's also, even within that focus on energy, when it does come up, it comes up more about, like, how do I make sure my people in the municipality are taken care of? And that is a complex problem, because you don't really have a very cost-effective way of providing those kind of resources when you don't own the grid, you don't own the interconnection points. You have the easement where the cabling and the infrastructure goes through, but beyond that, you don't really have too much of a say. And I think because of that, then they try to focus on where they can have an impact. And I think it's a missed opportunity, because if there
No,
were
I
enough
mean,
mayors that joined together, they could actually have an outsized voice in what the next step is for Puerto Rico. And that organization I don't see that on the horizon.
no,
One of the
there's
things that, so sorry, Tom, just very quickly, one of the things that we've seen on that front, however, CP, is that, if there's a consortium of 5 municipalities that are it's led by Villalba and Barranquitas, that are trying to take over a handful of hydroelectric assets in those towns, and that project is uh, gone nowhere, despite having
Yep.
local support from a couple of different levels of government. And so,
I think
we
that speaks to the capacity of these teams, because there were 5 municipalities, and I think, the leader has had higher aspirations that maybe, took away that focus for a while. But the other question is, who was actually project managing that? Who was actually the person that was the expert? Well, that person is now the executive director of PREPA. And once that one person left, then pretty much the project has absolutely been on hold. And then that's another example of a missed opportunity. Like, you would think that that one person that was project managing that would also be, facilitating and being a champion for that once inside, PREPA organization. And I think that just kind of shows how these municipalities don't have a deep enough bench to handle these issues on their own. And that's where, again, there's entities that, if they identify the project, they can actually provide that. But when you have a private entity that steps in to help with an energy project, there's also going to be the attendant suspicion of, like, who's selling out to who, who's getting paid off, who gets money beneath the desk, the table, irrespective of the reality. that then becomes this kind of like subtext or that has to be addressed, and is also a challenge of operating these projects, even with the best of intentions. And we've been there
Yeah.
as a nonprofit model, doing nothing but work for the community, and we still constantly have to attend to the public suspicion, where you can hand them a gold egg, and the first question that gets asked is like, "What's wrong with the gold egg?" And then after that, the next question is, "What part of this gold egg are you taking from me that you're trying to give me?" So those are the kind of issues that I think we have as challenges.
Yeah, bandwidth. I'm glad you brought back up the bandwidth and the lack of training and things like that, and the follow through. I think I wanted to lack of understanding, really. I mean, broadly about the importance of the energy infrastructure and investment and the resiliency in terms of economic development and building from that base. And I'm not saying it's like not understood. It quite clearly is understood at a level, but there are just other priorities, right? The house is on fire, right? I don't have time. I don't have whatever. And so in some ways, I have to go back and getting kind of tired of doing this, but I like what the DOE and NREL and those guys have actually done with the Puerto Rico energy resilience, right? I mean, there could have been a risk of doing like way too little or way too much or over focus, and well, happy to criticize certain elements of it. The focus on providing resiliency and systems into health facilities through the island in the second part of it is aiming at something that is in every community in one way, shape, or form. And it's an important link, it's an important base. It's important to support that. It is another means of creating, some economic activity and by expansion within that neighborhood. And hopefully, when you see some of these things happen, the link and the priorities that you put into it as a community to more energy, more resiliency, more direct investment, moves up the priority list when they can. So yeah,
So
I mean, it's
DOE
good to hear.
still has on their plan
Yeah,
to take the PR 100 on a roadshow. They're actually, I think, probably behind on that goal where they had it. So I think that when that PR 100 gets out there and kind of circulates, and they start doing the roadshow, I will suggest to them, and I do hope that they take up calling a convening of the mayors, to actually provide them that brief in particular. A meeting of 72, 78 municipalities, would be, great, to actually, pull together, the mayors and present them the PR 100 study. And then that can help drive it down, the message, and maybe lead to potential empowerment that then expands the conversation. Because I think that's what happens. Right now, we are just in an artificially binary decision. There's Luma, no Luma,
yeah,
and largely ignoring the issue of Genera. It's really becomes a whole, Luma has become the face of everything. And whether it's warranted or not, I think that is a conversation that short circuits some of the more important decisions that Puerto Rico has to face and still has the opportunity to attend to.
yeah,
But I think we're seeing a number of things that really kind of like have undermined that, the 20 pre-approved ER2 projects, I think, show a decision making or a selection process that is focusing not on direct contributions to residents and more about indirect contributions to the grid. But if the grid is not in a great condition, then really what are we doing here?
yeah,
So I think that there's a number of opportunities that we have. I would hope, Tom, to your point, that the PR 100, once they go on the roadshow, will help open up that conversation. It will help, bring to the forefront the possibility that we still have decisions to be made, and we still have an opportunity on how we re-envision Puerto Rico's cost-effective and resilient grid for the future.
Mhm. What do you think? And we're going to head into overtime here, and so maybe the discussion or the answer to the question is, look, we've got a bunch of people coming in, new administration. They start taking their office in January. Maybe the forum should hold a briefing on the energy system for let new legislatures and the government. Clearly we can bring in CNE and some great people. We can help do that. If they
That's a
don't want
great
to, we
public
can do it on
service.
our own, record it. And I've been thinking that one of the things that we might be able to do through this, because we are a network and we've got on island and off island and the ability to address certain issues, but just making sure people are hearing, like, this is the way it works. Like, why is it so vitally important that you make the top priority getting the frick out of bankruptcy for PREPA, right? Because none of your other plans can happen until it does, right? I mean, anything major is going to be held up, and even minor stuff like opening up
Imagine,
financing, right?
imagine if the parties don't come to an agreement and then the court actually decides that now PREPA does not have bankruptcy protection. Then it becomes a feast of a feeding frenzy on whatever assets can be had.
Honest to God, there is no way to enforce that. Right.
Well, what would
It's not a
happen?
feeding frenzy. It's
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
not a
frenzy of legal
well,
fees
there we go. It's a
and
frenzy. Okay, yeah,
ending
you're
in
right.
nothing.
It's a feeding frenzy for
but
attorneys.
it's
But
what would happen is the bottom would fall out of the system, and people would. It's not about getting an uncompetitive set of bids for tranche 3. It's that you would put a death nail in
Yeah.
development on the short term. One of the things
Uh,
that Tom and I have talked about on Tom, to build on what you were saying, is
yeah.
not only doing, hosting that type of energy debate, but having, energy pledges, having certain degrees of advocacy work, working with candidates, working with, different levels of government to make sure that they are really aware of two-way flow of information to understand what are the challenges and what can be done about it. Recognizing we're coming up on an hour here, CP, I want to offer you the opportunity to list a couple of priorities that you would recommend the next governor of Puerto Rico really focus on. One of the things that um, I think disappointed many voters from the current administration was the lack of nuance, as you said. It's either Luma or no Luma, but the detail and the answer obviously lives in the gray area, and so beyond just saying energy is a priority, and that's how energy is a priority, is because we've said energy is a priority. And what would be a couple of things that for you'd like to see focused on in the next administration?
okay, so but my feeling is that if the if the governor, in collaboration with the legislature, could actually help hone in and perfect existing laws within the scope that they have, to me, it would be simply readjusting the law that created PREPA and put it solidly on a path for becoming an asset management resource. And that way you're sending a signal that the commitment is towards private independent system operators and different generators contributing to a grid. That is a signal that would be unmistakable. As long as you can even have the discussion of a PREPA 2.0 or 4 pillars for
Yeah.
Multier or anything like that, you are still injecting an uncertainty that is a backdrop that Luma, Genera, and other entities, including the Cooperativa, have to live in. But if we can actually say that no, that we're shifting this out of P3A through a legislative project, and then also selecting right administrators where they nominate for the P3A and where they nominate for PREPA, you could actually do a great service by shifting out the functions that right now are with the P3, move them over to PREPA, and with PREPA as a focused on asset management instead of an operator, eliminating the operator role, then you will actually have a much clearer message on who is governing who will oversee who. The Energy Bureau right now has on their shoulders way more responsibility than they probably should have been taken on. They had to take over the tranche process because what do you have in PREPA? Operators, not asset asset managers, not system operators. So I think that right there would help clear up the actual political and regulatory terrain, make sure that an Energy Bureau doesn't have to run a renewable energy tranche process because PREPA's focused on operation instead of asset management. You know, that's the whole outlook there that I think would clear up a lot of things. And that would be my takeaway. For this group, you guys aren't off the hook. I think it would be great for the forum to actually sponsor a workshop that would basically invite DOE, present their PR 100, and then organize and coordinate. And I hope that I'm not now giving, you know, this all falling on Javier. Javier, I'm going to apologize in advance if this app turns into more work for you. But it would be great to organize and actually sponsor in collaboration with DOE, a workshop that would be a welcome aboard for legislators, a welcome aboard for the alcaldes. You know, convene that over 2 days and then train up legislature on key terminology, key ideas, concepts, and bring CNA in, you know, but not do it as a panel kind of discussion. Actually do a knowledge transfer workshop, which would be PR 100 presenting their findings, CNE presenting their findings, pulling in maybe representatives from the colegio, because at the end of the day, you have to make clear what is Puerto Rico's constraints, what are Puerto Rico's wiggle room, and then by sharing that knowledge, the hypothesis is that the legislatures can then enter into more sophisticated conversations with with the people they represent, and also with the general public at large.
Yeah.
So I think
No,
that's
I think all of that. I mean, it is exactly the kind of thing. It's going to be much more valuable. I mean, I don't think you should go much beyond the municipalities. I think it'd be great to get the alcaldes into that mix to understand. It's just understanding, hey, what is the current system? How do the laws work? What is the contract with Luma? Do you guys understand that you do not have a privatized system, that you actually have contractors for a public system, and that it remains in public ownership? And to your point before, you've actually thought about this a little farther than kind of what I threw out there. But to the operations versus asset management, I still think asset management is key right now, but it's not sufficient. You need, as I said before, you need planning, you need strategy, you need to be thinking forward. That's what these guys need to be doing. They need to be doing developing. They need to be doing the tranches exactly, as you're saying. How do we work this? How do we do? Because it's their responsibility. They are the public entity for energy, responsible for energy in Puerto Rico. That's what the law says, and that's fine. But if we don't do that, and this is how I think maybe we can get everybody to help support this, is that it's not to make a better private entity, whether it's a private or a public system in the future is irrelevant. If at some point you do want to pay off the contract and bring everything back in, you're going to need a super competent, experienced group at the helm that has been running these things that can begin to do the absorption and the reabsorption of these elements while working with the private entities like the Cooperativa and other distributed energy providers that are the fact of the land, and be able to do that competently. If eventually you do want a fully public system, and God damn it, I'm not going to settle for anything less. Well, this is a step you need to take to eventually get to the point where you pass the legislation to do that.
it makes me think a little bit of
Yeah.
the mayor of Chicago in 1920s, William Hale Thompson. Part of his mayoral platform was making sure that the United States stayed out of the United Nations. And it was like nobody asked the mayor of Chicago what his opinion on this was. It's not up to you, right? And so I think we have to make sure that elected officials are focused on what's possible, what they can do, and be articulate with regards to how do you achieve it. It goes into the expectation management that Tom and I are always talking about, that we spend so much energy, both as the electorate as well as the elected officials, talking about things that are neither desirable, possible, or achievable, and in a reasonable amount of time. And so making sure that we are focused on setting good goals, articulating those properly and putting us down a path towards achieving them. I think those should be critically important, and it's on us as voters to make sure that that those are held as highest priorities. I think on that note, we'll leave it there. CP, thank you so much for being a part of the Puerto Rico Energy Forum and for your insight and yeah, your insight.
Yeah.
Always
Thanks, Roll.
happy to join in. Yeah, I'm late for my next, so I will excuse myself. Thank you very much. You all take care.
See you
All
next
right.
time.
Thanks.